Hey everybody, welcome to My Green Pets. I'm William Green, and for today's Orchid Chat, we have a really special guest. We got Brandon Tam here. Brandon is the Orchid Collection Curator at the Huntington Botanical Gardens, which is near Los Angeles, technically Los Angeles, I think. And he has been doing this for a while. He's got a lot of insight about orchid culture and conservation, and we're just thrilled to have you. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you for having me, William. It's a great to be a part of this experience, and anyway, to be a part of the botanical community to share what we know here at the Huntington is always a great experience. So, once again, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem. I was able to dig up a little bit of information about you. Brandon, it says you've been doing this since you were 16 years old.
Yeah, it feels like it's been. I'm currently 27 at the moment. I can't believe how quickly time has flown here at the Huntington. It almost felt like I just stepped on campus last week. Time flies here. We have so many projects going on that it's always hard to keep track of time, especially now with the pandemic. It seems like it's an entire blur. But originally, growing up as a child, I used to garden with my grandmother, and she was the one that actually got me into orchids. She got me into gardening first, and then I found out orchids existed. She had this beautiful white flowering cymbidium growing in her backyard. I asked Grandma, "What flower is this?" And she told me it was an orchid. And ever since then, I started collecting orchids over the years. And eventually, my father was the one that said, "Hey, why don't you volunteer at the Huntington Library Art Museum and Botanical Gardens?" So he brought me here. I volunteered within the gardens, and at the age of 16, the director here offered me an internship to work with the orchid collection. So it was right timing, right place, right time. They got me to where I am today. And of course, I've progressed since then, but it's amazing just to see the transformation within the collection here, personal transformation, as well as the Huntington as a whole transform in just a little over a decade.
Now, when you were volunteering as an intern, was there a lot of people that were wanting to do that, or did you find yourself kind of the only person around with this interest?
It was, yeah, that's the interesting thing. It was really just myself really interested in the orchid collection here at the Huntington. We've a little history behind the Huntington. We had a collection, a very respectable collection, before 1930. But what happened was there was a stock market crash, of course, and the Huntington had to sell off that collection for financial stability within the organization. So between 1930 and let's say the 1990s, we were primarily without a orchid collection here at the Huntington. So there was really no interest.
60 years.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate because a lot of the major discoveries were happening during this time. Orchid fever was running around among collectors and hobbyists, and it was unfortunate because the Huntington was not a part of that part of that era. So really, there was nobody here at the Huntington interested in orchids. But thanks to our director, our former director, he just retired as of
I saw
4 days
that, yeah.
ago. Yeah. He actually did his dissertation on orchids. So he had a great passion for orchids, but being the director, his attention and focus was in all different directions.
Right.
As you can imagine, he ran the entire place, and he was kind of the one that told us what to do, what to get done. And so he brought me in to really bring an emphasis of an orchid collection back at the Huntington. And in the last 10 years, it's just grown significantly, and it's become a core collection of the Huntington's botanical collection. So in regards to interest, there was not much interest until now, and we're trying to be a bigger part within the orchid community and supporting botanical gardens, societies, and things like that. So absolutely, the interest initially was very limited, but it's grown over the years.
Sure. And, I had an opportunity to visit the Huntington a few years ago, and I made just a video tour of my experience, and I got to say, it's the nicest botanical garden I've ever visited. The orchid collection, that kind of atrium there in the middle
Yeah,
with
yeah,
all
yeah.
it is so well manicured. There were Path Rothschildianums with like 6
Mm.
flowers on them, just not like one, like a lot. I couldn't believe the size of the plants,
Mhm.
how floriferous they were. Maybe
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the number of plants that you are actually directly responsible for, and
Mhm.
what that consists of.
Absolutely. So here at the Huntington, we have over 10,000 orchids within our collection, and we say over 10,000 as a safe number because we don't want to give any wrong ideas because we've actually lost count because there's in the last 10 years we've had a huge influx of orchids that have come into our collection, and that's primarily through acquisitions, through donations, through purchases. So it varies through a lot of different methods, but a lot of the paths that you've seen in the conservatory, we can't take credit for that because a lot of those paths came from a donation in 2010 from a gentleman by the name of S. Robert Welts. He lived in
Mm,
Santa Barbara, California. He lived down the street from Oprah Winfrey, quite the wealthy gentleman. And he had a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. He bought some of the best stuff, and he was a very very prominent hybridizer and collector within Southern California. And we're just incredibly grateful that he decided to donate upon his passing, donate that collection to us. So a lot of the plants that we have in our collection was thanks to him because of his ability to grow such large specimen plants and buy things um, that are really very valuable from a from a conservation standpoint and also from a hobbyist standpoint.
he must
So
have known
very
that they would have been in good hands.
exact. Well, we're very grateful that he chose us, and it made a lot of sense to come to us because we wanted to rebuild our collection. We never had a prominent emphasis on orchids. The last time we had an emphasis was in the 1930s or 1920s. So he recognized that and he donated the collection to us, and it really gave us a jump start because we had in the early 2000s maybe we had around 1,000 or 2,000 orchids, which is respectable, but it was not enough compared to a lot of the other emphasis that we have here at the
Sure,
Huntington's.
there's a lot of
Uh,
collectors that have 1,000 orchids in their
exactly.
apartment.
Exactly. So thanks to Robert Welts, he really gave us kind of a jump start in building this collection. And since then, uh, people have known, oh, the Huntington does orchids as well. So why don't I donate my orchids, or why don't I contribute?
So
Whether it
it's
may be fine.
snowballing.
Yeah, it's snowball. It's almost a challenge to keep up because it's exponential, and we're absolutely so grateful for that. We're grateful for the support within the community from individuals, whether it may be financial or maybe from acquisitions as well. We're just getting a lot of that, and it really does add up and support the Huntington. So the growth within the last 10 years have been exponential because of that major donation of a collection. At the time, the collection itself was appraised to be around $1 million. Um, and that was beyond generous of the gentleman, and it was kind of close timing too because he said he wanted to donate the collection to the Huntington upon his passing, and he was actually on his deathbed when he made that request. So thankfully,
Wow.
that actually came to fruition, and it's been here for the last 10 years, and it's just an amazing collection that we can actually display where you saw in our atrium of our conservatory where people come and visit. And I will say, if you had visited, 4 or 5 years ago, things have progressed even more so since the last time you've seen it. It's this whole experience that I've been a part of. It's been a learning experience. When I first came in, I was a hobbyist, but I wouldn't say I was a professional. But I don't think anybody coming into the botanical world can come in as a true professional
Right.
because
There's so much learning on the job.
there's so much learning on the job, and especially with plants, with orchids especially, the family, it's the largest family in the botanical kingdom. There's so many plants you got to learn about, from the different continents that they come from, the different countries, the different altitudes. There's so much to learn about orchids, and that's what keeps people so entertained with plants in general. Is you can never learn it all in a single lifetime, not even 1% of all
Right.
the plants in the world.
So taking care of 10,000 plants, is there such thing as a typical day for you?
No, there's never a typical day, which makes what I love doing here at the Huntington just that much more enjoyable. It's never consistent, it's never by schedule. It's never, watering, for example, watering an orchid collection or watering any plant collection. It's never consistent, even in an environment that's controlled, even in a controlled environment such as a greenhouse or conservatory. It's unpredictable because the external environments can cause certain things to, for example, if it's colder in the winter, then things will dry out a little more in the greenhouses, so you got to water a little more. Whereas in the summer, the fog is always going on, so your plants are actually staying a little more wet. So watering habits vary by time, and of course, in Southern California, we're always desperate for rain. But when we do get rain, the saturation, the humidity levels in the greenhouse fluctuates a little bit. So it varies quite a bit. That's one aspect. Sometimes we're working with pollinating, hybridizing. We're working with other botanic gardens. Pre-pandemic, we would visit other botanic gardens. We would donate plants to them. We would visit them. We would share knowledge with each other. Sometimes we'd be going to conferences, doing this and doing that. Within the Orchid collection, we have over 40 volunteers that come in on a weekly basis.
That's what I'm thinking. You don't have enough eyes to be looking at 10,000 plants every day.
Exactly. Never enough people. And it's been, I've always appreciated my volunteers, but I appreciate them even more so now because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, they're not able to come in. A lot of them are retired. A lot of them are on the older side, so they're a little more. COVID becomes more of a problem for them. So we're recommending to them to stay home. So out of the 40 volunteers, 3 are able to come back and help, and we're doing our best to maintain the collection and just the whole grounds itself. But these 40 volunteers will do various things from watering to grooming to repotting. Repotting is a never ending, it's
right.
like
It's a constant thing.
It never ends. So it's challenge, but that's what makes it so interesting, so fun. You got to be creative. You got to find better ways of being more efficient.
Right.
You really have to learn on the job, and there's never anything that really prepares you for jumping into something like this, because it's a multifaceted organization, and even within the collection, it's just there's so many different angles to it.
Yeah. But one of the big questions that I had was, what does it take to be a collection curator? I mean, it's not every day. I mean, first of all, how many collection curators are there even across the United States? It doesn't seem like, So, I mean, it sounds to me that experience and willingness to learn is almost more important than a resume of all these botanical courses.
Exactly. That's absolutely true. And you point out a good point there. It's, first of all, the amount of positions of orchid specialists, orchid curators in the United States, it's only a handful. There's not that many. But here, every organization is a little different, but how we hire here, you don't have to have a degree to become a specialist or a curator of a collection. It's nice to have, and it shows how much you've accomplished previously, but it's not going to tell you exactly how you'll do moving forward with the collection if you do go into that position. So for me, myself, I became an intern here when I was 17, around 17 years old. They hired me as an orchid specialist. And over the years, I progressed over the years, but I began with no degree, nothing at all. But
fresh out of high school.
Yeah, fresh out of high school, exactly. So of course, I went to got my BS in plant science at the California State University of Pomona. I got my plant science degree there. But here at the Huntington, I'd say some of our curators don't have a degree. Because we don't find it as a defining factor in how capable you are in caring for plants. Actually, now that I think about it, going back to my college days when I was getting my degree, at least half or even more than half the students within the plant science department originally came from other majors. They didn't originally major in plant science. They started in engineering or software or things that they thought they would enjoy. But eventually they said, oh, wait, there's this plant science, there's this agriculture, this horticulture department. And they kind of dive into it because they took a GE class within that proximity of education. So I discovered that, that's the way that people get into plant science, horticulture, is usually by accident, because they don't realize how much fun or how much, some people, for some it's a career, some it's a hobby.
Right.
But
it's thought of as a hobby almost, people don't think about, I could do this for a living.
Exactly. Most, back in the day, agriculture, at least in California, agriculture accounts for a big part of our economy. And people don't realize the extent of how much you can you can study or how much in what areas you can work in with agriculture. It's quite diverse. It's quite big.
Yeah,
But to
you've got
get
technology, you've got
Yep,
genetics, you've got all kinds of
yep,
bio stuff. I mean, it
exactly,
doesn't just have to
exactly.
be growing plants. Like
It-
it's very
yeah,
deep.
exactly. And it's amazing how expansive that is. But absolutely, no. The 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 test that we have here is if you can survive the first few years, you probably can make it here at the Huntington because it's hard. Once you just jump into the Huntington, there's so many things going on at the same time. Many times you have to really problem solve yourself. You really don't have other staff to help you because many other staff are in their own areas trying to figure out
Right.
their own problems.
Everyone's probably
Yeah,
very overextended.
exactly. So my first day as an intern here at the Huntington, I remember very clearly. The director told me to jump in his truck, and he drove me to the back of the greenhouse. He dropped me off, and he says, "Have fun." And I went in. I was a 16-year-old. I was a hobbyist, but I can't say I was a professional, experienced person within the orchid field. But basically, everything I've learned along the way was just learning from making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And that's really the quality that you want in a staff member is can you problem solve? Can you figure things out on your own? A lot of these plants that we take in, they don't come with instructions. They don't come with an
Right.
IKEA manual. You really have to learn and piece together the information that you've learned over time. So uh, for example, if you're getting this new species that is barely into cultivation, there's no information behind it. You really have to gather the information and base it off of other plants that you've grown that are similar to that plant or grow similar in that environment or things like that. So
Mm.
you can kind of guess, okay, if this plant is growing in elevations above 10,000 feet, it's probably cooler elevation. It's probably requires a little more water. It's not doesn't like to be potted, or
So
there's
really
a little bit.
weather and geographical data is really important part of that, figuring
Exactly.
out what it needs.
Exactly, analyzing its natural habitat, and a lot of people aren't able to visit its natural habitat, but this is kind of the principle of a lot of different zoos is they send their staff members to the wild.
Mm.
So the San Diego Zoo, we work very closely with the San Diego Zoo. They send their employees to the natural habitat of where the animals are living, and they study that habitat. And the same principle goes with the Huntington. We send our staff member out. They really take the time to analyze and take in the environment that these plants are growing in. I recently went to Ecuador to study a few plants growing in the wild
Oh,
there,
how nice.
and it was you read in literature, you grow by this, you grow by that, it's in this elevation and that, so you have all the information, but it's like connecting the dots on a piece
It's
of
not the
paper.
same.
It's not the same. Once you realize the environment, it's like, oh, this all makes sense. It connects to this, connects to that, the wind flow, the airflow, the amount of rain, the environment, the sun, the full sun, the shade. It all connects when you see
Yeah.
it.
Now it's like I need to create this in my growing conditions.
Exactly, exactly. So we pull that information, we bring it back here, and at least from that experience, I can say that my growing abilities have become better because of that. Because we're
They've
able
gotten
to.
pretty good. I think you've at the Huntington you've won over 100 AOS awards, including 5 FCCs and more CCEs. I mean, quite a
Yeah,
few.
it's
You got quite a bit of a resume of good growing techniques there.
it's a lot. It's a learning experience, and we're not ashamed of telling people we do kill plants. That's the process of a botanical garden. Our job is to figure out how to grow these plants. A lot of these plants they don't come with instructions, and a lot of times they're not very widely grown in cultivation. So we're not ashamed in saying we do kill plants because this is part of our job.
Right.
You really can't learn.
Makes us all feel a
And
little better.
yeah, exactly. I really mention that to every society I speak to because it's something that it's part of the learning experience. And people always come to me, why am I killing my supermarket orchid, or what am I doing wrong? And I say, don't worry if you're killing a few of them. I know, yeah, it's a little painful, but it's part of the learning experience. Growing up as a hobbyist, I've killed my fair share, and even as a professional, I killed my fair share of plants within the collection. And in order to get all these awarded plants, to get all these FCCs, these CCEs, you really have to make the mistakes along the way to kind of get to that point. But doesn't mean of course, try not to make that same mistake twice. And of course, if you can prevent somebody else from making that same mistake that you made yourself, share that knowledge. And that's why we're here at the Huntington,
Right.
is to share that knowledge of, what did we do wrong, and
That's one thing
document
that's
it.
been really cool about the online social media and all that, because you see other people's mistakes,
Yeah.
you share your own mistakes, you share your successes, and you can get ahead faster just by interacting with others.
Exactly. And that's, social media and all the internet abilities to really connect each other. It's bringing a whole new dimension of being able to learn from each other. And I think this pandemic has kind of really given societies a new societies are being tested in ways of finding new ways of communicating, of bringing speakers. So a lot of new societies are having international speakers speak for their
Right.
societies, because
I
in the
didn't know what
past,
Zoom was 8 months ago.
exactly. And now we know how to, everybody knows how to, my grandma, my grandpa, and everybody knows how to use Zoom these days. You click on a button and that's more or less kind of how you go. But we've come a long way. And I think Zoom has brought a new dimension to learning about not just orchids, but plants in general. Across the US, we're kind of worried in past years that plants are not very popular anymore.
Right.
Back in the day, it was an old man or old person's hobby, but this pandemic has forced people in their homes, and we've seen this big boom of people growing indoor plants.
Right.
These anthuriums, these aeroids, these
absolutely.
These
orchids. And we're seeing more. The more you see other people doing it, the more you're like, gosh, they really seem to enjoy this boring plant hobby. Maybe it's not that boring,
Exactly. And this is the same exact idea with, going back to, when I was in college, these people getting into my major because they didn't realize this was a thing or it wasn't very interesting until they dived in. It's the same with the hobbies, the same with the staff that work here. A lot of these people were not originally plant people, but they become plant people. And plants have this magical ability to really suck people in, and once the momentum starts going, I think
it's a really deep rabbit hole.
Exactly. So I'm very hopeful for the future of the botanical community as people are discovering the plant world, and hopefully dive in more into orchids. Orchids are getting there, but there's the hype between or behind aeroids and anthuriums and all of that. That's to a whole new level. I see people paying thousands of dollars for a division of a certain plant, and I'm going,
Monstera, variegata, or something.
Exactly. It's something that would have costed a few hundred, now it's a few thousand. It's a little crazy, but I appreciate the enthusiasm within the community. So,
and going off of that, the mission of the Huntington, I mean, you must have some hybrids, but is it more, let's conserve species as well?
Yeah, so we don't discriminate between species and hybrids. We do collect both, but we do give an emphasis to species because as a lot of orchids are going extinct, we're trying to capture as much as we can, and no single botanical community or botanical garden can save it all. It requires truly a network. It doesn't, for example, it doesn't make sense for 24 botanic gardens in the United States to focus all on Paphiopedilums. Why not designate a few as Paphiopedilum botanic gardens and let them emphasize on it, and a different one could be on Stenhopias or this and that. So our goal is with our collection is to make sure that we can send duplicates off to other botanic gardens so that there's a duplicate copy somewhere else. That's one major goal, is conservation through sharing. And
that's a good point. One of the questions I had from one of my viewers was, as hobbyists, serious hobbyists, how can we help that conservation effort?
Yeah, that's kind of a big question, and there's a lot that's behind it. But one part is being involved with the community, educating the community on the different obstacles we face as an orchid community, and what we face going forward as regards to conservation with plants going extinct, recognizing which plants are of particular interest in saving. We can't save it all, of course, but what makes logical sense. So, for example, in Southern California, we have the ability to grow mini orchids outdoors.
Mm.
So, and a lot of these orchids that grow outdoors are generally on the bigger side, Dendrobium speciosum, Lilianceps, a lot of Cymbidiums. So for example, at the Huntington, we've established a Cymbidium species collection thanks to the help of George Hatfield, who is he's very experienced in Cymbidiums and former AOS president. We said it makes total sense because we can grow them outdoors, because we can grow them very easily. It makes sense that we do grow them here in
Right.
Southern California. So,
Grow what you can.
exactly, and it doesn't make sense for I don't know for some botanic garden in the growing in a snowy climate to grow Cymbidiums outdoors because they have to deal with the snow.
Yeah.
So why not delegate that to us? So as hobbyists, it makes sense to figure out what you can grow. That you can grow within the parameters that you're given. So if you only have if you're have an apartment, grow things indoors, grow things that are miniature, grow things that you can grow in a terrarium. Don't try to grow things that are not feasible because that can cause a strain on the supply within the orchid community. If people are trying to all rush to grab one specific species,
right, that they can't, that half of them can't grow.
Exactly, and they eventually kill it. That's not it's just not very practical. By no means, I'm not trying to discourage people from trying, but just
sure.
but be realistic about it. If you bought the same 5 plants 5 times and you killed them 5 times, the same exact species, maybe it's not the best fitting orchid for your climate or for your growing conditions. So being cautious of what you can grow, just because something just was discovered doesn't mean you have to have it.
Right.
Figure out if you can grow it first. So here, it's like here at the Huntington, both as an art we do have an art collection and a library as well. But we have a set standard of what we should collect, because even though we do collect, we can't collect everything. It's entirely impossible. We have to be practical about it. So we here at the Huntington, we try to avoid growing very high elevation plants. Because it's not very practical for us. We can kind of delegate that to organization botanic gardens in South America where they have the high elevations naturally. That's something that we want to achieve eventually, but we have to have the greenhouse space, the facilities to grow high elevation growing plants, which is a goal eventually, but we don't have the resources to do that entirely. We have a intermediate to cool growing greenhouse. We have an intermediate greenhouse and a warm growing greenhouse and a conservatory, which is has a few different chambers, but we try to be practical in what we can grow at the moment and go from there. Something recently we've been getting into is ophres, and that we can grow outdoors here in Southern California, the bumblebee orchid. People are so fascinated by that, so we thought, let's grow some of this, grow some of that. But I'd say, primarily be for any advice to a hobbyist, be realistic of what you can grow in your parameters, and that itself can help a lot in the conservation aspect in the community, so that the people that can actually grow can obtain those plants and try to produce seeds,
right,
have some seeds, and send them to the lab.
And that's something that I'm seeing a lot more of in the online community is people at home building glove boxes and flasking their own, something that was unthinkable when I was a teenager. Now teenagers are flasking seed pods. So it's almost like, hopefully that conservation effort that we see at the botanical gardens can somehow be extended into each hobbyist's home. I mean, if I have one species that's just, endangered, not very common, whatever, and I can make a few seed pods and get them out there so there's more of them, it's one way to help.
Absolutely. And there's many ways to help, but I'd say that's kind of one aspect, and just trying to spread to make the orchid community bigger. Really, that's kind of the biggest help. Is nobody's going to care about orchids if there's no interest about it. From a conservation standpoint, no, orchids are pretty, so what? If you help people understand the complexity, the family behind the orchid family, have them bring them into orchid societies, educate them about what the plant is all about. Most people only, most average people think that orchids are the only orchids that exist are the ones at the local supermarket.
In the grocery store, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the phalaenopsis, but people think that that's the only orchid that it really exists. People
When
don't
they
even
hear orchid, that's what they think of.
exactly, and people don't even realize that vanilla is an orchid. Every time they have something that's vanilla infused or flavored, it's an orchid. People don't realize that, and I don't dig them for that. It's just within the botanical community, it's our job to really share that knowledge, and that's something we're doing here at the Huntington is education. Education is a very big thing. To inform the public, to share with the public that our motto with the conservatory here at the Huntington in the front, it's plants are up to something. People don't realize uh, plants have a mind of their own. They're doing something that just because they're going at a snail's pace doesn't mean they're not doing anything.
Right.
They're doing a lot.
Do you guys ever get any celebrities there to kind of put a famous face on the Huntington or on orchid growing? I recently saw an article, maybe it was last year, that the rapper DMC has an orchid collection and it had him in there with his, and it was just like, wow, that's not, I did not expect to see that.
Yeah, no, that's we do have a lot of famous people that visit the Huntington. Whether or not they pursue orchids, that's a different question. I'm not entirely sure, but our most recent guest, I think, was about a year ago, a little before the pandemic. Kanye West came and visited us.
Interesting. Maybe he saw DMC's. Maybe he saw
exactly.
DMC's commercial. He was getting jealous.
Exactly. Yeah, it's quite possible. It's people are always trying to find new ways to learn about new things, but. I was in the greenhouse doing work, and he popped in with one of our staff members, and I didn't realize it was Kanye at first. I was like, that person looks very familiar.
I've seen this guy.
Yeah, I've seen this person. So he to what level of appreciation he has for plants, I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely.
Hey, he was there.
Yeah, he was there. He came and he saw and he looked through our stuff here at our plants here at the Huntington. He definitely liked the desert garden, so that's one interest that he pointed out
it's
to one
beautiful,
of our
by
staff
the way.
members.
If you haven't been to the Huntington, the desert garden, it's like walking through a coral reef. It's absolutely gorgeous.
You really have to spend 3 days here to see the entire property. 212 acres of property here, which is large for Los Angeles, but always lots to see, always lots to do here. But yeah, I mean. Hopefully celebrities will get onto the plant train at some point and encourage more people to be a part of the plant community. Lots to be a part of the community with bonsai, camellias, orchids, cacti, you name it. There's so much that you can learn from this big plant group.
For sure. Brandon, if an orchid society wants you to come speak for them, what do they need to do?
Just email me at btam@huntington.org, B as in boy, T as in Tom, A as in apple, M as in Mary @huntington.org, and I'll be out there. I look forward to when this pandemic is actually over with and I can resume talks again.
Right.
But it's always great to meet hobbyists across the United States, and it's very interesting what everybody grows. Every region grows something a little different, and they focus on a specific genus or a specific group just because of their environment. But absolutely, it's just amazing to see everybody. I have the privilege of attending a lot of AOS members meetings throughout the years, and you can truly learn a lot from each other. And one thing I will say is that there's no one right way of doing something. There's many right ways.
Preach.
Exactly. So just because somebody's telling you this is the only way to do it, because this growing up, as a young kid, there's been a lot of people that have been telling me, you gotta only do this. There's only one way of doing it, this way. But my boss, one of my former director, he shared with me a piece of quote that he lives by every day, is that just like at a restaurant, let's say a cook, there's many chefs in the kitchen. Many chefs will cook differently, but as long as you produce a good tasting meal at the end of the day, that's your goal, and you have succeeded at the end. So, translating that to orchids, there's many ways of growing orchids. As long as you grow a healthy, happy plant that flowers, you've done it correctly. Of course, there's different techniques and different ways of doing something better than the other method, but don't let people get discouraged in saying that the way that you're doing it is wrong. If you have good if you have a good outcome out of it, if you're actually getting flowers, getting good growth, things like that, don't let people discourage you saying that that's wrong. For example, here at the Huntington, we have a species, Mexipedium xerophytica.
Oh, right. Yeah. The little white slipper from Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. Well, people think, oh, this plant is a xerophyte. It grows on rocks. It's growing in a region where it's hot and, doesn't get much water. People in literature, have been growing these things like a cactus or a succulent. But here at the Huntington, we grow them sopping wet. They're extremely, extremely wet. If you looked at the potting media, it's beyond wet. It's almost like muck. But I really wanted to grow them wet because on a photo, I've seen many photos of this species growing in the wild. Where it's growing in the wild, yes, it's growing on a rock, but the rock is always wet. So it's kind of
there you go.
Yeah, some indication that there's some water flowing down the side of the cliff or whatever it may be. But just because it's growing in a region where it's just on a rock without any anything around it doesn't mean it doesn't like water. So
rock doesn't necessarily mean dry.
Exactly, and that's what people think rock equals dry. Exactly, I think that's a very good way of putting it. So here at the Huntington, the growth that we've gotten on these plants have been exponential because we've changed our habit. Just because literature says do this doesn't mean we necessarily have to follow that. We can find new ways of doing something better. And because of that, we've been able to grow these plants very big and make divisions and share them with botanic gardens throughout the U.S. because this is a plant that's not quite commonly seen in cultivation. It takes quite a bit of time to propagate them in labs if you can actually propagate them in labs.
Right. You never see them for sale.
Yeah, and if you do see them for sale, they're on for like 5 minutes, and it's like $100 per tiny growth. But it's methods like this that we're trying to improve on, and because of that, we can distribute these plants faster and more widely available through the botanical gardens. Hopefully, they can also do the same and share with hobbyists within their own region. So the goal is to propagate, to share, to make sure that these plants will never leave the face of this planet.
Good. That sounds sharing is caring.
Yep, exactly.
Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure. I wish we could keep talking for another hour. If you are interested in visiting the botanical garden at the Huntington, are you guys open for visitors right now?
Yeah, so currently we're open at the Huntington. The only parts that are not open are the art collection and the library because they're buildings. And unfortunately, the conservatory at the Huntington is closed at the moment because the county has designated that as a building as well. So we'll have to keep everybody updated. If you're coming here to see orchids, the only place you'll see the orchids is the conservatory. But we'll keep everybody posted as soon as we can open because we're very hungry for our usual visitors to come back. Our plants are getting a little lonely just seeing me and the fellow curators here. They always miss the public, so we're looking forward to everybody's return.
And if you see Brandon, make sure you say hi.
Absolutely. I'm usually running around in my cart, but come by and say hi, and I'll be sure to see you guys.
And one last question. I'm sure you get this a lot. Favorite orchids?
Favorite orchid? Ooh, that's going to be, growing up, Paphipetalum has always been, slip orchids, the entire genus is with the frags, with the paphs, but I'd say Paphipetalum micranthum is my personal favorite.
Yeah.
Huge. I love the flower. I love the color. The petals and sepals is almost like a mosaic. It's almost
you have different color varieties. You have the Aburnum, the white one, and you have some darker ones. And it's a nice one.
Even the species, the genetic diversity is amazing between all of them, and the form is also just crazy as well. There's a lot of different forms with that, but I would say that's my favorite.
Awesome. Brandon, thank you again so much. I'm going to stop our recording here, and Perfect. I will see the rest of you guys later on My Green Pets. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Brandon, and see you guys next time.
Thank you for having me.